Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is Commissar here, and I'm back for game number 2 of this best of 3 series featuring EG's ThorZaiIN, sponsored by Raidcall, and NaNiwa, the teamless Swedish Protoss. So it's a bit of Sweden vs Sweden action coming out from this DreamHack group stage, and we do indeed see ThorZaiIN being up 1-0 at this stage, with NaNiwa desperately needing to play out something on Entombed Valley. Okay, so last game, of course, very disappointing by NaNiwa, just solid standard play by ThorZaiIN. ThorZaiIN did nothing remarkable, take no particular early leads. He just basically had a build order counter to what NaNiwa did. That's okay, that happens. NaNiwa just has to put that behind him and move on, and hopefully for all of our sakes as viewers as well, he can pull out something a bit more interesting to watch than he did in game number 1. Okay, so NaNiwa, of course, is going to be, what? We're on Entombed Valley, so what does that mean? It means probably going to see some sort of 3-base play, of course. Natural is very easy to secure, the 3rd base is close by as well. As a general rule, this map tends to produce fairly long games. Why do I say that? Well, A, it's incredibly large, and while the warp gate mechanic can counter that with some builds, in this matchup, not as often. That's more of a PvP. PvZ, sometimes all-in thing, but we do indeed see close by 3rd base. Say these 2 bases very close together, very easy to defend this 3rd base in most scenarios. The 4th base, not too bad either. The 5th base is very open, making it quite difficult to defend. At the same time though, it can be done if you have any sort of center map control. Long games, it tends to come into effect, and the of course the final bases in the corners are very far away from everything, which makes them very difficult to defend. But at the same time, of course, you don't want to send your whole army to attack them, because that just leaves you wide open down the middle. As such, you'd expect to see generally long games from this map. There are lots of bases, lots of space, and I'm just going to have to wait and see what indeed is produced by these 2 players. We do indeed see a Zealot coming out from NaNiwa. A lot of players do skip that Zealot in this matchup, but we do just see one coming out at the moment. The Zealot probably not going to achieve too much. We are seeing a barracks before command center from ThorZaiIN to get his fast expansion. As such, I'd expect him to be completely fine in terms of his defense of, like, say, a couple of Zealots Stalkers at the very start before Warp Gate. But it is important to note that we do see 2 gas geysers from NaNiwa with only 2 workers on each. As such, we're going to see a very specific builds coming out of NaNiwa, as he is managing his gas very closely. What's also interesting to note is that he's getting Warp Gate, he's getting sentries and whatnot, and his mineral count is now being spent on that expansion. There we go. I was wondering when that was coming down. It's a slightly slow expand for this matchup. The expand of ThorZaiIN going to be well ahead. It's going to be ahead by a little bit over a minute, in fact. And we are also going to see this sentry before a Stalker. This is very interesting, as that means, obviously, that we need to see the energy saved up by NaNiwa for his build, so he's probably going to be a little bit vulnerable in the early stages of this game, typically. And that may mean there's a window for this natural to be denied, but I'll have to wait and see, really, what comes out of NaNiwa. Okay, we do indeed see a 1-gate robotics play, so it is going to be very interesting to see how he uses this. There are, of course, many ways to utilize it. Most probably it's going to go straight for this Colossi, although last game he did show that he likes the Twilight Council route as well. On this map, really, anything can work. I mean, there's wide open spaces, so it's great for charge lots to engage in the middle of the map, but again, there are many chokes as well. In the middle of the map especially, great for Colossi. So anyway, it's really whatever the player chooses. That's why this map is so cool. There are lots of interesting places in it, lots of interesting things can happen, and it's just so open for whatever. Just a nice place for the players to play out the sound games on. And we are still having quite a lot of downtime in the early stages of this map. We do indeed see the Marines just having to deal with this one probe. It will go down. That was just a scout for a very early 3rd base, it appears. So NaNiwa does have a proxy pylon though, which has been placed over by this 4th base. Obviously a great spot to warp in for 2 reasons. One, it does watch the 4th, but more importantly, I suspect for this game, it is going to be it's going to provide some option to harass this 3rd base with potential Zealot warp-ins over here. And oh, this is very interesting. ThorZaiIN, very aware of the potential for proxy pylons, is going to actually scout this, and this is such clever play from ThorZaiIN, and I love it. The question is he going to see it? Oh my god. Look at ThorZaiIN. Look at his vision. He does not see it. His brilliant idea of sending out this SCV, for it was a brilliant idea, ended up failing because he thinks now that there is no proxy pylon. In his mind, he's confirmed it's not there, but it is there. He just didn't see it. As such, this could be very, very cool for NaNiwa very quickly. Very shortly, rather. Okay, so we are going to see this third base down for NaNiwa before the third base of ThorZaiIN yet again. Last game, NaNiwa went for that quick third and failed to defend it. Can he do anything different this game? Of course, there is the issue that this map is a little bit bigger than the previous map, although it's not that big of a difference. Like, I mean, the difference between Daybreak, still a fairly long walking distance. Entombed, I mean, sure, it's a big map, but the distance from base to base isn't huge for those Marines to walk across, especially if they do have medevacs to fly across in. But the big difference is Colossus Tech. And the Colossus Tech, as I said, is the most likely route for NaNiwa to take, and he has taken it. He's also going to get his +1 fairly early on as well. And NaNiwa is going to have some Colossi up before any pushes come, it looks like, because the medevacs haven't started just yet, and the Colossi are starting before the medevacs. There will be Marine Marauder, there will be Stim yet again, so it appears that ThorZaiIN is going for just about the same timing as last game, which is almost surprising in that it generally, in best 3 series, you might, say, pull out different builds each game to sort of throw your opponent off a little bit, that sort of thing, in case there is a third game to sort of mess with them a little bit. But again, going for the same strategy could potentially work. It was very solid last game. It's not particularly high risk. I mean, if this push gets crushed, sure, that's bad for ThorZaiIN, but is it likely to be crushed? Not really. What does a Lotus player need to crush pushes? They need AoE. That one Colossus will provide it. If a second Colossus gets out, this push could be demolished by force fields and by that Colossus. But really, with the medevacs out, it's not likely to be completely annihilated without at least doing something. And with it doing something, ThorZaiIN probably won't lose the game by pushing it at this time. It's a very small commitment. It allows him to take his third, just takes pressure off of him, puts it onto his opponent, makes it third easy to secure. And meanwhile, of course, NaNiwa is fully aware of what is happening this game. He does indeed see the force moving out. The Zealot is going to delay the push even more. I love this from NaNiwa. Moving out the Zealot away from his base to just delay that for a couple more seconds. Maybe allow for another warp in of units potentially. A cannon is going down for NaNiwa, which is a bit weird in this matchup. But, you know, every little bit helps. But here we do indeed see the choke. There is so much sentry energy here. 3 full energy sentries makes a total of 12 force fields available, and it appears that rather than barreling down the front, ThorZaiIN is going to go for that 2-pronged attack route. Probably going to poke at that third with this force on the ground whilst doing a drop into the back. But oh, the observer sees the drop, and I assume that NaNiwa saw that too, and he is indeed pulling a Colossus and an Immortal to deal with that. And yep, he should be okay. Going to lose a few probes. Meanwhile, of course, over here, the main army of NaNiwa waiting at the third base. The push is not actually going to come by ThorZaiIN, as ThorZaiIN realizes that is not my opponent's full army. He is ready for my push at the third base, and as such, that was about as smooth as it gets for NaNiwa in that initial defense. Of course, ThorZaiIN took no losses himself that was significant. He lost, I believe, what, either 2 Marines or a Marauder, I'm not quite sure which one. But the losses this game have been very, very tiny for both players. Workers killed there were 3, so I mean, that probably paid for the guys that died from that medevac. But overall, a very, very good start by NaNiwa, I'd say. Just because NaNiwa expanded burst, you'd expect the Terran to maybe be slightly ahead at this stage, but he's not. It's still anyone's game though, so we'll have to wait and see what does happen as this game unfolds. Okay, so we are going to see Vikings coming out now 2 at a time by ThorZaiIN. You really want to get to that 6 to 8 Viking 6 to 8 guys in terms of Vikings in order to deal with those Colossi effectively, in order to be able to start getting them down in a couple of rounds, a couple of volleys of fire. But, meanwhile, we do indeed see the High Templar transition from NaNiwa. A very well-timed transition indeed, as basically by the time Vikings will still be coming out onto the field, as there are 6 out now. But Vikings will still be being produced as this first Templar do come out. And of course, if the Terran player overcommits to Vikings, suddenly the Templar become way, way, way too strong. The big question is, of course, how the engagements do turn out, because generally in this sort of matchup, when Templar are involved, when Storm is involved, it all comes down to the engagements, because Storm is just such a game-changing spell. So of course we have to watch out for two things. One, how the Vikings are dealt with, how the Stalkers deal with the Colossi, how well NaNiwa controls his Colossi, and two, how well the High Templar are positioned, if there are ghosts brought in, if they're able to snipe the High Templar or what. As we do indeed see the Ghost Academy now completing for ThorZaiIN. In terms of upgrades, we do see ThorZaiIN about to hit 2-2 in upgrades in about 2 minutes. Meanwhile, NaNiwa is going to hit 2-1, that 2 being the armor, in about the same time. So there will be an upgrade advantage for our Terran player. It's not going to be too huge, but what's interesting to note is that we are seeing air attack for ThorZaiIN, going to make those Vikings more powerful. And we are seeing 3 at a time production now as those Vikings. And with 10 Vikings already out, I mean, 10 Vikings is a good number, but do you really need 13? Do you really need more than that? I don't know. There are 5 Colossi though, so the Colossus production is high for NaNiwa. It's not going to be the end of the world to have these Vikings. But at the same time, ThorZaiIN's going to have a pretty weak standing army on the ground. His medevac count is quite low. And with a low medevac count, Stim becomes a problem. With a low medevac count, Storm becomes more powerful. Although feedback, of course, is good against the medevac on its own. So really, the big question is it going to be an overcommitment here? He's stopped now, so it looks like it might be okay. And NaNiwa does see this move out coming by ThorZaiIN. He's going to try and defend this newly established 4th base, and he should be okay in terms of his positioning to deal with this. Meanwhile, we see nothing going on by ThorZaiIN. No drops anywhere, no counters anywhere. No double-pronged aggression anywhere, rather. And the observers do tend to deny that sort of play. And that is why we do see the triple observer play by NaNiwa, apparently. Okay, so we do indeed see pylons over at the 5th base of ThorZaiIN, well, the 5th location, rather. And we are seeing the 4ths being taken simultaneously. But the cool thing to note by ThorZaiIN is that he's getting 2 additional command centers. Probably just going to be for mules, just mine at bases super fast in unsafe locations. But this is the big warp in here, and they are going to see the ghosts, and how they're going to react, they are not going to. So NaNiwa may be aware of the ghosts, he should be aware of them at least, and he's just going to move out and decide not to go. And now he's going to go, and there is a big storm taking out a big chunk of the army before this engagement starts, and the Vikings, of course, are taking so much damage. That was a big miscontrol there by ThorZaiIN, losing a lot more than he should have. Supply-wise, it does not matter though, as ThorZaiIN is still very close to max indeed. Meanwhile, the Zealots are causing quite a bit of damage here, a couple of kills between them, and not too much economic damage shells overall. But there was the mining time, this one Zealot getting an extra couple of kills where he shouldn't have been allowed to. And this probe is still in the back of the base of ThorZaiIN, comically enough. Meanwhile, this has allowed NaNiwa to take an aggressive map position. He is very close to his opponent, and he has pylons to reinforce with. Meanwhile, of course, he is building up a significant bank in order to start reinforcing should a battle hit right now. If we do see a big battle right now, only one player will be able to reinforce quickly, and that player is NaNiwa. ThorZaiIN, of course, does have a very strong starting army nonetheless, so he is certainly in a decent spot despite this for NaNiwa. Although, I do like the position for NaNiwa at this stage. He, of course, only has 4 bases, no 5th base is on the way. Important to note, he is leaving back High Templar to deal with any sort of drop play. Maybe 1 at each base. Yes, 1 at each base in order to help feedback and storm the ultimate counter to drops. And meanwhile, this is a good idea by NaNiwa to try and harass on 2nd base, while attack at one angle, harass another. But, of course, that harassment was shut down very easily. Very little damage being dealt over here. Total number of workers killed this game, 11. Not the biggest deal in the world, although, of course, ThorZaiIN does have a slightly smaller economy than his opponent. That's not considering mules, of course. With the extra orbitals, mules are a big deal. Okay, so over for NaNiwa, we do indeed see him just sort of probing around, trying to look for any opening, and he's going to go for it. He's going to go for this planetary. The storm's acting as a kind of force field, shutting out the units of ThorZaiIN. He's trying to get EMPs off, but he is not connecting with the majority of them. The, of course, storm has been used up at this stage. The Vikings are going to town on these Colossi. The Colossi are all going down. The Vikings is demolishing them. Colossi not protected at all. The storms in the end, perhaps protecting a couple of those units rather than blocking them out, because a bunch were able to seep through regardless, and that was a big win for ThorZaiIN, as he was able to just basically kill the Colossi uncontested. And most of the army of ThorZaiIN was kind of safely away from the storm, safely away from the action. Okay, so meanwhile I do indeed see a big whooping of Archons for NaNiwa, a very, very clever way to reinforce, because of course the Protoss player needs his AoE, and Colossi do not produce that quickly. What does produce quickly? Well, of course Archons do. They take about, what, 20 seconds total, I believe? There's a couple of seconds for warp-in, plus about, I think it's 15 seconds to merge? 12 seconds rather. Okay, but anyway, it's quick. The big issue though is EMP. How the EMPs connect, because there's still a ton of ghosts, a ton of ghost energy. These Vikings are being repaired. Overall, the army is very, very strong for ThorZaiIN, although there is one issue, which is that his Viking count is still high, and the Colossus count for NaNiwa is basically non-existent. So we have a maxed NaNiwa, maxed on Archons, High Templar, Charge Lords, that sort of army composition. Very weak against ghosts, yes, which is okay for NaNiwa. But again, the Vikings not going to be very useful in this engagement. But the EMPs are good, hitting the Archons, hitting a couple of Stalkers and an Immortal, all very vulnerable to EMPs, especially those Archons and that Immortal. And those High Templar, but here's going to be the big push in with this split army of NaNiwa. He's trying to make something happen, but his Archons have not even connected yet. His Zealots are being picked off by the army, by the starter step of ThorZaiIN, and the EMPs are hitting absolutely everything but the High Templar, forcing the retreat out of NaNiwa. So ThorZaiIN playing this out very, very well indeed at this stage, and ThorZaiIN realizing that he doesn't have that much use for Vikings in this fight is going to try and harass with them, I believe, as some sort of counter pressure. Of course, though, ThorZaiIN is covered on all fronts. He is basically looking pretty safe at home, despite this army trying to probe in, trying to push forward, and really, sure the Immortals, the big Immortal switch, sure the Vikings aren't that great against them. And by the way, Colossi are coming out, which the Vikings will probably crush. But the EMPs are the big issue here. And what I'd like to see from NaNiwa is perhaps the use of some Warp Prisms to try and save those units from EMPs, to try and do some lift-up action. Maybe more High Templar, more Warp Prisms, and less trying to barrel down the throat of a big Terran army, which can just demolish the shields of this Protoss army. So really, I like ThorZaiIN's position here. NaNiwa, though, in a very good spot of his own. He does have a big bank. He has a bigger bank than ThorZaiIN. He has 5 bases now. He's been 1 base up for quite some time. Again, though, the incomes will be pretty similar at the moment. The mineral income, of course, in the favor of ThorZaiIN. Gas income in the favor of NaNiwa, due to those extra orbitals that were added earlier. Still, weapons continue to be a threat towards ThorZaiIN's economy throughout this game. But that is only one form of harass. It's been kind of decent. I can see a couple more Zealots getting in here as well. Oh! High Templar? Was that High Templar sniping? I'm not entirely sure what was sniped just there. Meanwhile, of course, just anything that can be sniped are being sniped by ThorZaiIN. Very, very good pressure. And the 4th base is again under threat, but I feel like ThorZaiIN's army is in such a good spot. I feel like the ghost count is too high. I feel like it's just going to crumble here. The planetary, though, is going to go down. The force fields are brilliant. The ghosts, though, are seeping through and are going to be forced back, actually, by the storms. So that was a big win for NaNiwa here. And NaNiwa is suddenly starting to look quite commanding in his position in this game, as he is, again, not ahead in supply, but his bank is so big. It's ridiculous. He only has 14 gates. Well, rather 12 gates. That's a little bit odd. I would expect him to add on like maybe even 10, 15 more at this stage, just because he has the money to, and he just has such a big bank. He wants to reinforce. He's not doing that, which I feel like is a big mistake. But his army's good. His money's good. His base count is good. It's better than ThorZaiIN's. And upgrades-wise, we have 3-3 versus 3-3. And here we do see the Archon being sniped by ThorZaiIN. A nice little pickup there. Getting a few Zealots and an Archon for free. And it is going to indeed just sort of intimidate NaNiwa. He's going to just sort of back up a little bit. One goes overextending without actually getting off any EMPs. But the big thing that's confusing for me in this game is the High Templar, apart from drop defense. Because there were a couple just around the map for the sake of killing off drops, which appear to have gone away. They appear to have been used up elsewhere now. The High Templar count has been quite low at the army. As I said, that he reinforces with High Templar. But, again, it's almost as if he's afraid of these ghosts, and ThorZaiIN is just going ghost crazy, as if this was, what, pre-patch 1.5 or 4 or whatever, whenever Snipe was nerfed. But that was against Zerg. That was a different story altogether. But it's been a long time since I've seen a ghost count of 22, which is what we see for ThorZaiIN this game. And again, ThorZaiIN, despite NaNiwa's repeated harass, has been shutting down everything. There is one Zealot doing perhaps a little bit too much damage, but again, even it's not going to actually kill anything. So units lost do show it being fairly favored towards ThorZaiN, which of course he needs, being behind in these bases for so long. And the big issue I feel for ThorZaiN going forward is that he's been denied of bases quite a bit. He's going to mine out in a couple of minutes, say 5 minutes, within 10 minutes he'll be mined out of these bases. He needs new bases, or he needs to end the game right now. He has the army, his bank is starting to build up. Either he needs to actually be able to secure these locations and mule them up straight away by taking a strong position with his army, or he needs to just make something happen and end the game. But it's very, very hard to end the game when your opponent has a bank of 10,000 total resources, and that is what NaNiwa is playing with. Okay, so NaNiwa is of course just going to be waiting around, just again being very, very patient this game, perhaps too patient. His warp gate count is improved. It's back to up to about, what, 20? So that's not bad at all. Of course, a warping of 20 High Templar into 10 Archons is very, very powerful. The harassment continues over at the third base, but still, this entire game, well, a lot of workers have been killed over the entire game, and the worker count is kinda low for ThorZaiN. But really, with so many mules, he doesn't need workers for anything but gas, and his income is still fine, provided that he has bases to mine from, due to his orbital command count. As such, the harass I feel is not a big deal. All that matters to ThorZaiN is his army, and this harassment allows him to have more supply in army and less in economy. Whereas NaNiwa only has 130 supply in army versus the 170 supply in army of ThorZaiN. So you can see ThorZaiN, of course, having that big army supply lead, and that is going to favor him in this situation as both players have big banks at this stage of the game. NaNiwa trying to push the issue here, trying to make a big push, but the EMPs did everything, although the High Templars are still with their energy up. The shields though of the army are down for the most part. A couple of free marauders there for NaNiwa, not a big deal at all. Meanwhile, of course, we are seeing the reinforcements coming out for ThorZaiN. Viking count still high, Ghost count still very high. Ghost, Marauder, Viking, Medevac, very, very powerful. Meanwhile, of course, Moistive is being killed, but like I said, ThorZaiN doesn't even care enough to retreat them at this stage, due to his mule count. So what, these Zealots coming in, it doesn't even matter. They're being cleared out, they're not doing anything too big of a deal. And really the only thing I'd like to see from ThorZaiN is perhaps more use of these gas geysers, which is a bit odd. Meanwhile, of course, we can see the Vikings trying to harass these Colossi, just trying to poke in. Both players being incredibly patient, but here's the big push by NaNiwa, being EMP'd instantly, but the High Templars still have energy. Where are the storms? There is one storm coming down, but look at all these units, no shields on anything except the High Templar. And that is absurd. These immortals so squishy at this stage. I feel like this isn't the time for NaNiwa to poke due to the EMPs, but he can't really change that. He's just going to go for it anyway, and he is getting a lot of damage off with his Colossi. The Vikings, though, have cleaned them all up, and now is the time for ThorZaiN to push back in and do as much damage as he can possibly do. His Viking cap perhaps a little bit too high to deal with this ground force, but no. The army of Marauders, the Medevacs being crucial, are going to buy him a little bit more time. The big warp in from NaNiwa is going to mean that he is going to be okay. He's not going to lose the game just yet, but the supply is slightly favoring ThorZaiN. That's going to change. Like I said, the bank was in the favor of NaNiwa, but NaNiwa is so far behind on units lost, it's quite ridiculous. It is still even though. Okay, so what I'd like to see out of ThorZaiN, out of NaNiwa rather, right now is perhaps a big push in right now, because he can remax a little bit faster. He can get units in instantly, and I feel like if he hits at 200 straight away, that'll be a decent window for him to do some damage in. Meanwhile, of course, the space is being harassed by only a tiny group of Marines, but enough to shut it down, really. Enough to require a response. I'm going to have to wait and see if NaNiwa does indeed deal with that, or if he just moves on and tries to end the game right here. He appears to be doing that 200 supply push. He knows he can get out an army a lot faster than his opponent. He knows that 3-3-3 is kind of almost better in a way than 3-3. Fairly similar though. And we are going to see again the armies meeting up for another big engagement. Of course, ThorZaiN's army is significantly depleted this game, as NaNiwa is going to move in. EMPs are what ThorZaiN needs to keep himself in this fight. The Vikings, of course, being fairly useless to supply against such a low count of Colossi. Only 2 of them are in the field at the moment. So it's all going to come down to these Ghosts. Can the Ghosts be super cost efficient? Or will the High Templar get a couple of clutch storms and crush through the army of ThorZaiN? As ThorZaiN loses this army, he loses the game. If NaNiwa loses this army, he is completely okay. What's going for ThorZaiIN is this one base is... Oh my god, even being denied by NaNiwa. I couldn't see that on the minimap. But NaNiwa just looking very, very strong as a result of that little check. Nothing is actually going in the way of ThorZaiIN right now. So he needs a big army to kill his opponent. That is his one hope. It's a decent hope too, as this army is about as good as it gets without maybe... Yeah, it's about as good as it could get. And of course the EMPs are of course keeping this army at bay. The Archons so useless if they have been EMP'd. And oh, we are going to see ThorZaiIN commit here. It appears he is charging forwards. He is trying to take out these Colossi at the very start of the engagement as well with his Vikings. And he is picking off so many Archons here. The army of NaNiwa is melting in the initial stages of the battle. But now on lower health, ThorZaiIN is just suffering the consequences of having little supply. The warp in of NaNiwa is huge. The Zealots are trying to make the battle last for NaNiwa, as the more evenly he can trade, the better. And oh, the storms are huge on top of all of the medevacs, but it is not enough as the healing is still too high. And ThorZaiIN is again going to hold on for a little bit longer, but as I say, that 20 High Templar are being warped in simultaneously. The bank of NaNiwa is insane, but it is being depleted, and that is making this game very, very close indeed. NaNiwa has been relying very, very heavily on his bank, but he's been fighting so inefficiently that the Terran player is in such a good... as he's traded so well that the base difference has been keeping NaNiwa alive. It hasn't been keeping him ahead, it's been keeping him alive. And that is really ridiculous. This base over here, meanwhile, is going to be sniped by ThorZaiIN with a couple of overstimmed, perhaps, Marauders. And the army of NaNiwa, look at it, it's only High Templar and Archons with a few Zealots. And really, this army is super weak against Ghosts. And NaNiwa is struggling so much against these Ghosts, I really feel like he either needs to just go for Colossi and just try to deal with the Vikings, try to control really well against those Vikings, or go for Warp Prisms. The Warp Prisms can be sniped by Vikings, yes, but they can potentially dodge GMPs. It requires good control from NaNiwa, and we just haven't seen anything that remarkable from him yet this game. In terms of his army control, he's played very solid in terms of his macro, but in terms of his unit control, it hasn't been super remarkable. You know, of course, space is so vital for ThorZaiIN to get a little bit more money to try and get to that point where he can remax. But again, NaNiwa has been great at denying faces. He's just trying to starve his opponent. The only problem he's had is just those battles. The battles where he's traded so inefficiently. So we'll have to wait and see what does happen as I bring up the unit tab just to give you a better idea of what the battles are going to entail. Again, that low CB count means that the armies are very even between these two players. In fact, ThorZaiIN has a superior army despite that supply count. So in a big battle, ThorZaiIN should be okay. And it's all up to NaNiwa and his bank, and he is indeed re-establishing this 5th base over here. Meanwhile, 6th base rather. Meanwhile, ThorZaiIN has been unable to get a 5th. That is the big deal. And can ThorZaiIN remax out? It appears that he won't be able to. ThorZaiIN's income is down to basically 0, and that means he's gonna have to go for it and see what he can do. This is the big army of NaNiwa, but it's pretty out of position at the moment. No Colossi in it at all. The EMPs are doing tremendous damage to this army. Meanwhile, of course, the Zealots are just powering through as best they can. The EMP is going up on absolutely every unit. These Archons could be focused so easily, but it looks like the Zealots are doing so much damage. Meanwhile, of course, as soon as they die, everything melts due to the weakness of NaNiwa without his shields. Meanwhile, of course, the army of NaNiwa is being reinforced, but the ThorZaiIN has so many medevacs that the DPS is significantly reduced effectively as a result. And NaNiwa has just depleted his bank, and he is suddenly in a lot of trouble. 75 to 79 supply at the 40-minute mark. All he has left is gas, and that means only Archons, only High Templar, and those units both get EMP'd to hell. This base is going to fall no matter what NaNiwa does, and suddenly it is NaNiwa who is behind in the bank. Suddenly it is NaNiwa who is just behind overall, and NaNiwa has said something in Swedish before leaving the game. So that was quite ridiculous. ThorZaiIN playing the most patient game I have seen in a long time. What we've just witnessed is NaNiwa just trying to make something happen and being unable to figure out how to engage the army composition of ThorZaiIN. So despite the economies being so stacked, like at least a base up for the NaNiwa all game long. The trading was just so brilliant for ThorZaiN. It just didn't matter in the end. And despite the fact that ThorZaiN had basically mined himself out in almost everywhere, he was able to pull through in the end with just the bare minimum surviving. I mean, you can imagine that if NaNiwa had another warping left, if he had his bank still up right now, if he had 5,000 resources and was able to get in a bunch more zealots, able to get another army out, that's game over. But the fact that these guys have used so well has just been so brilliant for NaNiwa. Although I would like to bring up the point, 2,300 gas, that's what, 10, 15-ish? Yeah, 15 High Templar, I believe. 16 maybe even. The EMP energy was out. There was no more ghost energy left for ThorZaiN, and perhaps more Archons would have actually dealt with this. Something to think about. It's an interesting thought. But the big point is this base is going to die. That was going to leave NaNiwa with a 1 base economy, which is basically mined out. So despite the player with more bases was actually mining out of the bases that ThorZaiN never secured. And just overall, well played by ThorZaiN. So I hope you enjoyed the series. Please do subscribe. Please do tell me what to do better. I know I'm rusty with the casting. That's because I haven't been casting lately. So please give me some feedback. And I'll see you guys all on another day.